Okay, I've got 101. Let's go ahead and open our meeting, our regular April Board of Trustees meeting, April 29, 2021, 1 p.m. I'll open it with this kind of the preface of our, I guess, our meeting venue. Governor Abbott has temporarily suspended certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act in response to the COVID-19 public health disaster. Specifically, governmental entities are permitted to meet by telephone or video conference, provided the meetings are audible to members of the public and allow for two-way communication. The suspension of certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act is intended to reduce in-person meetings and the spread of COVID-19 while maintaining government transparency. Today, the NBU Board of Trustees meeting will be held by video conference. The board welcomes and encourages the public to participate during the public comment period. Members of the public will be allowed to participate during the public comment period to raise any matters related to NBU that is not on the agenda, as well as discuss any item on the agenda. We ask that all participants state their name and address and limit their comments to no more than 5 minutes. Due to the electronic limitations of this meeting, citizens will only be allowed to make comments during the public comment period of the meeting. For items not posted on the agenda, then the NBU Board of Trustees may not deliberate on any item that is raised by a citizen that is not posted on the agenda. For such an item, NBU may 1, make a statement of fact regarding the item, 2, make a statement concerning the policy regarding the item, or 3, propose the item be placed on a future agenda. A recording of the video conference will be made available to the public on NBU's website after the meeting. Okay, I'm going to ask Laura, please take roll call.
Mr. Harrell?
Yes, ma'am, present.
Dr. Hoffman?
I am here.
Mayor Brockman?
Present.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Peters?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
I'm here.
Mr. Kelso?
Here.
Ms. Locke?
Here.
Ms. Shriver?
Here.
Mr. Hubbard?
Present.
Ms. Krause?
Here.
Ms. Britton?
Here.
And Ms. Rivers, I'm here. Quorum is present.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura. Okay, we'll open, I'm going to lead with the Pledge of Allegiance and Invocation. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, if you bow your heads with me, please. Dear Lord, we thank you for another day. We thank you for our wonderful community. We ask you to please watch over those, protect our great nation. We ask that you please guide us as we make decisions that benefit and help build our future as a community and as an organization. We ask these things in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, that takes us to public comment.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Yes. So my name is Jody Hekinen. I'll turn my camera on so I'm in the car. My name is Jody Hekinen. My address, once I get into my house, is 5657 Copper Vista, up in the Copper Ridge development. And more of a comment. I know you guys discussed this. This has been something that's been near and dear to Mr. Taylor's heart for quite some time, and NBU in particular, with the water situation up in Copper Ridge. I'm not suggesting that people don't understand what's going on up there with the families that have not closed in their homes. But I can tell you for myself, and a lot of this between myself and the builder, those customers and the builder itself. But I left Germany on the 8th of January. I've been in a hotel with my wife ever since because we're unable to close on our home because of the water situation. The only point, and I don't want to go into all the details with that, but the point I like to make is the builder is going to eventually sell those homes and make their money, whether it's to us or somebody else if we leave. The developer has made their money, and they'll continue to develop, continue to do their business. But the families, I believe there's 25 people in our email group. I think there's 18 to 19 families that are waiting to close. I can tell you that me myself, my house has been done since the middle of December, and I was supposed to close in the middle of January. So my statement would be, if anything you guys can do, and it's MBU, it's nobody else can really do much with it. But if there's anything that you guys can do, whether it be new agreements, whether it be, dealing with settlement properties directly. I do know that the well drillers are up there quite often. I see them all the time when I drive by there. So they're actually continuing to do work. But whatever you can do to assist those families up in Copper Ridge, we would definitely appreciate it. And I know you guys are busy. I don't want to waste your time. Mr. Taylor has been very good with us and keeping us updated as best he can. We do appreciate that, the families that are impacted. And that's my statement.
Okay, thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments, and we will continue to work forward in that effort. Anybody have anything to add to that?
I would just say that we do have an item in executive session that we'll for sure take that up today. And I'm sorry, Ms. Chisholm, you started to speak.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I was just going to say, my name is Monica Chisholm, and I, too, like Jody, one of the families that are impacted by the situation in Copper Ridge. My future address one day will be 5670 Basilone Ridge. We were set to close back in February. And because of the water situation that we only recently found out, and not to your fault, so I'm not here to blame or anything like that, but just, finding out it's late in the game that we did. My husband's active duty. I'm a 13-year veteran of the United States Air Force. That is supposed to be our retirement home, and he's retiring in a year. But yet, because we don't have utilities and can't close on the home, we are technically about to be homeless on the 15th of May. Our lease is up at our apartment, and we have to find somewhere else to go. And that right now looks like the sofa of a friend. And so, like Jody, I just want to echo that, the families, and they're all varying degrees of situations and circumstances, some a little more dire than others. But just so you guys that are aware, and that, the impact on these 20 plus families who are just standing ready. Houses are finished, ready to close, and, some people are at the point where they don't have anywhere to go. And I just wanted to, express my gratitude toward NBU, because I know that Ian Thomas and his executive board have been working very hard to move this train along as best they can. And so I do understand a little bit more about contracting than the average Joe, because that's what I do for a living. And so I do understand, you guys ensuring that you mitigate risk associated with NBU, as well as your stakeholders. And so, but I also just want you to keep in mind all the families that would love, to one day get into their houses, and hopefully this year, and, settle down and move out of living in boxes and things like that. And if you guys will keep us in mind as you're making the decisions concerning any amendments to the agreement that you currently have, and anything going forward, that, we are real people, real lives, and work very hard to all get to where we're at, to hopefully, own these homes one day. And so I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening. And I pray that, again, that you consider us as you're making decisions going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Chisholm. We appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Okay, not hearing any. That takes us to our next item, items from the chair. We've got number 1, report from Investment Committee. I believe Mr. Gray is going to take that one.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Harrell. This is Bob Gray. The NBU Investment Committee had our meeting on April 26, 2021, earlier this week. Those in attendance included myself, John Harrell, Ian Taylor, Don Schriever, John Warren, Thomas Varner, Amy Chappell, and Dwayne Westerman. There were 4 items discussed. They included the following. Number 1, John Warren presented the proposed changes to the financial policy. Number 2, Don Schriever provided an update on the correspondence with the rating agencies. Number 3, Dwayne Westerman provided analysis regarding potential options for increased liquidity. And the final 4th item, Dwayne Westerman provided an update on the preliminary timeline for the issuance of the proposed Series 2021 refunding bonds. And that was our investment committee meeting of earlier this week. Thank you, Mr. Harrell.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, that moves us to items from staff. Number 1, CEO's update.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I actually have a number of items today. It's been a lot has happened in the last month, and I'm going to lead off with the status of the MBU headquarters, our new facility. We're nearing the completion of schematic design, and as part of that milestone, we completed what's called the traffic impact analysis and submitted it to the city of New Braunfels for review. And for those that don't know what that is, that's I like what Ryan says. Ryan says we're usually on the other side of the table. This side, we're on the developer side of the table. And so a developer will submit an impact of their traffic that has to be reviewed by the city. And as part of that, after we submitted it during the week of April 11th, we hosted 3 virtual evening meetings with homeowners in Stone Crossing, the Enclave at West Point, and the neighboring apartments, as well as Hunters Creek subdivisions. Most of the questions that we received were around traffic and concerns for our fleet vehicles on the road. So in our traffic impact analysis, we recommended upgrades, and primarily there were modifications to intersections and that type of thing. From what we understand, what we had proposed will meet all requirements that would be put on a developer for safety or level of service for the roadways. So if we were a private developer, we would likely move forward without any changes, but we're not. We're a community-owned utility, and these folks are our customers and will be our neighbors. The subdivision homeowners have been in communication with city leadership, their council representative, and their mayor to voice their concerns, and it's specifically to request an alternative ingress and egress off of Loop 337 to our property rather than solely using West Point Drive. Over the last year, we've evaluated this very thing, and we ran into a number of hurdles from cost to property ownership to TxDOT approvals and a number of other things. Nonetheless, after those meetings that week, we immediately set forward to revisit all of those analyses that we had done over the last year, and we updated our assumptions, our cost estimates. We re-reviewed regulatory hurdles and looked for any and all new ideas. We believe there's 3 options that are somewhat feasible. I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, none of them are easy. None of them are inexpensive, and they all involve some type of land acquisition. So we submitted those options this week to the city of New Braunfels so they can start looking at those. Under the leadership of Councilmember Bowers, which I appreciate very much, we're scheduled to meet next week with the city and MBISD to review those options with a regional perspective, because we're not just looking at the MBU property. There's, of course, as you know, MBU bought 70 out of 100 acres owned by MBISD, and they retain 30 acres adjacent to us. There's also the Lark Canyon development adjacent to us, and a number of things going on back there. And so we're going to look at these options with the regional perspective. I definitely want to share my appreciation for the time and the urgency that the team of the city of New Braunfels has put into this. They've answered our questions. They provided guidance because we do not do development stuff regularly, and they've been a tremendous help, and they've held us to every requirement that they would any other normal developer, and I appreciate them. So like I said, our next step will be a meeting next week at the city, and I will keep you updated as that develops. Next up is an update on ERCOT. Winter Storm Uri, it brought a lot of changes to ERCOT's executive leadership and the board of directors. And as y'all know, I'm on the ERCOT board. So a lot of activities happened there. On March 3rd, the ERCOT board decided to remove CEO Bill Magnus from his post with a 60-day notice. Currently, all of the unaffiliated board positions at ERCOT remain unfilled because they all resigned immediately after the event. And even without those unaffiliated positions, the board has continued to meet frequently to address a number of storm-related issues, and that the Texas State Legislature is also continuing to address. The board's municipal segment position on ERCOT, to let you know, my role has been the backup, essentially, the alternative representative. But shortly after the winter storm event, the primary representative resigned from the board. And at that point, I became the primary during that vacancy. We filled it again, and the next person had to resign because of potential conflicts they had going with ongoing litigation that was happening with ERCOT. And so I served in the primary role again. But recently, we now have a new primary. His name is Tom Hancock. He's the Chief Operations Officer at Garland Power and Light. And he's now currently serving in that primary role, and I've gone back to the alternate municipal segment board member role. Also this week, the ERCOT Board of Directors met on Tuesday and selected a gentleman by the name of Brad Jones to serve as the interim president and CEO. He has extensive experience, and I'll tell you from the folks that I've talked to kind of across the market segments, they all, his selection's been well received. I think he's going to do good things there. I'll tell you also that ERCOT staff, ERCOT board, all of us are waiting on the outcomes of the current legislative session to learn a number of things, to learn how the unaffiliated director seats will be filled, how the CEO will be selected. There are just a lot of things that are being discussed that until the session's over, the path forward is not clear. The next item I have is related to the Texas Public Power Association. I also serve on that board, and I'm also a member of the executive committee of that board. And we've also experienced leadership changes recently. Earlier this month, the TPPA board voted unanimously to do two things. The first was to sever the employment agreement with Russ Keene as the executive director, and to appoint Bob Kahn as the interim executive director. Thing is, Bob already has a job. He's the general manager of the Texas Municipal Power Agency. He's, of course, a member of TPPA, but he has an incredible background. He was at one time the CEO of ERCOT, served an executive role at Austin Energy, and has just had a number of important roles in our industry over the years. So he's agreed to serve as the interim executive director until early September of this year. And we're kind of timing that with the legislative session and such, and while we're looking for a new executive director. So that's in place right now. The next item, and changing gears quite a bit here, moving on to a different topic. At our last board meeting, we shared with you the work we were doing around our employee engagement strategic goal, and told you there's just a lot that's happening. In early April, we brought our management team together for an all-day in-person retreat facilitated by Dr. Rob Conopask. Y'all know he's doing a lot of heavy lifting on this for us. I was very pleased. I was very pleased with how that turned out, with the problem solving that came out from just the very open and candid discussions. I felt like a lot of work was done there. And particularly in light of the challenges we faced recently with COVID and Winter Storm Uri, and just the significant historic projects underway. I think it's important we continue to have these discussions.
Ian, sorry, we lost your audio. We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, you got me? Okay. All right, let me pick that up where I left off. The kind of the summary there is we have more of this planned as we work on that employee engagement roadmap that we discussed with you last time. Next item I have is related to an outstanding public service day recognition. At the New Braunfels City Council meeting on April 12th, Mayor Brockman read a proclamation dedicating the day as Outstanding Public Service Day to recognize the efforts of employees from Comal County, the city, MBU, TxDOT, MBISD, Comal ISD during the February winter storm events. And we were real proud and appreciative to be a part of that. So Mayor Brockman, thank you so much for doing that and recognizing our employees that way. I know it means a lot for them to be recognized. And then we had something similar happen on Monday, April 19th. The chamber chair of the board, Braunfels Greater Chamber of Commerce, the chair, Nathan Manlove, awarded NBU with the chair of the board award. They only give, I believe, 6 of those out a year. And they usually only give it to a person. This is the first time I know of they've given it to an entire organization's employees, and that's what they did this time. So we had 5 of our employees from our management team on hand to receive the award on behalf of all of MBU's employees who worked tirelessly during that event. I can tell you, I was there at the meeting, and they got a standing ovation, and it just went on and on. It was it was really nice to see that, and really appreciate Nathan and the chamber doing that. Next item is the weather and the drought and what's going on with the aquifers. On April 19th, MBU announced that the Edwards aquifer level dropped, triggering stage 2 of drought restrictions. The rolling 10-day average hit 649.6, which was the trigger. So we entered stage 2 on that same day. And of course, last night's rains and today's rains are very welcome, and we're hoping for more of that. It's never good going into the summer season already in stage 2, so we're hoping for some more wet weather. Next item I have is related to the Environmental Affairs Department. So as y'all know, we're constantly looking for ways to provide the best and most innovative services to our customers. And to that end, what we've done is we've renamed the Environmental Affairs Department. It might seem like a small deal, but it's not. What we're doing is realigning and changing its name to Conservation and Customer Solutions. And the idea there is to better reflect the evolution of our business as we expand our services and activities and look to the future. Currently, that group manages water conservation and energy efficiency, which is becoming very important with our utility bill management program. Key accounts, demand response, and I'll tell you too that looking to the future and the not too distant future, we have a lot of opportunities related to distributed energy resources, such as rooftop and community solar, battery storage, electric vehicles, and those types of things. And as we add resources, this is going to be an important area for this group to take on. The last and final item I have here is related to reentry. So over the course of the year, y'all know, we've talked about how we've continually modified our response to the pandemic based on the situation at the time. And with the rollout of the vaccine, we're at another decision point. So we have around 53% of our employees that have opted in and should all be completely vaccinated by the end of May. And we're looking at entering phase 3 of our reentry plan this summer. So we're gathering input from all of our employees right now. The managers are tasked with talking with the employees about what their situation is and how it's been working throughout COVID. So the point of that is to identify those positions that can work from home full-time, that can share time between home and office, or be full-time in the office. And it's important to note, at present, we don't have an office for our entire workforce, and we won't until the headquarters is complete. Y'all might recall that we were scheduled to begin leasing office space right around the time COVID hit, and we were able to eliminate that expense and not do it. But it's also put us in a position where not everybody has an office. So that's going to go into the discussion too. We're also going to include in this reentry phase a return to in-person board meetings, and we'll be looking to you for your feedback on that, what you're comfortable with and what you think is best for MBU in the community. And also we'll be addressing our reopening our lobbies to the public. So that's going to be a big milestone, and we're gonna hit that this summer. And that's the end of my report, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I failed to mention that item A, which you covered initially, the proposed MBU headquarters and access related there too. So we've checked that off. Okay, number 2, financial update and report. Ms. Kimberly, is she on?
Good afternoon, board. I'm Kimberly Huffman. I'm going to be presenting to you the March 2021 year-to-date financial update. This update reflects the 8-month mark for our fiscal year and financial operating plan for fiscal year 21. This month's financial update does include the recording of a reversal entry from our electric revenues of about $24.9 million for the utilization of the Power Stabilization Fund that was booked as an offset to power costs in February. As this was an unusual entry for MBU, as we've never encountered this before and required some further research and analysis, it was confirmed that this revenue had already been previously recognized through the standard monthly recording of the power cost recovery factor entry. So the net effect of the reversal of this entry that you'll see in the financials is a reduction in our electric revenues for the month. Moving into the key financial ratios that we track throughout the year, we're showing a debt to capitalization ratio of 32.3 for the month of March, which is well below our 50% in our financial policy. Our debt service coverage is at 2.72, which is within our financial policy. And our days cash on hand is reported out at 106, which is above the 140 days that we like to see. And our days, below our 140 days that we like to see in our financial policy. And our days liquidity on hand is at 148, I just wanted to point out that the lower debt service coverage that we see this month, as opposed to last month, is partially due to that power stabilization fund entry that we made this month. And then that the ratio should continue to climb for the next 4 years as long as the operating expenses come in under budget and as we are collecting those dollars back from our customers for the power costs that we saw in February. And then, like I said, we did see an increase this month from last month in our days cash on hand. And then this chart, as you can see, we had dipped down in our days cash on hand ratio back in February. We're reporting out at 106 to date, so that is increasing, and that was partly due to that additional liquidity of that $50 million note that we brought in March. Okay, our operating revenues by line of business. So as we know, water does impact our revenues. We did see lower rainfall and higher temperatures during the month of March than in historical averages. We did have higher revenues in electric and water than budgeted and higher revenues in all lines of businesses when comparing it to prior year. MBU continued into the month of March, applying that one-time adjustment or credit to those residential and commercial water and wastewater customers from that February storm. We are showing that electric is at $60.8 million greater than prior year and $63 million greater than budget. Our water is at $1.9 million greater than prior year and $100,000 greater than budget. And wastewater is coming in at $2 million greater than prior year and $600,000 less than budget. Our operating expenses by line of business, we're showing that we are coming in less than across the board than budget. Electric is $200,000 less than prior year and $6 million less than budget. Our water is $1.2 million greater than prior year and $2.8 million less than budget. And wastewater is $900,000 greater than prior year and $2.1 million less than budget. And our combined O&M is $1.8 million greater than prior year and $10.9 million less than budget. And we will continue to monitor those operating expenses through the remaining of the fiscal year. Our impact fees year to date, we've collected about $12.3 million, reporting out greater than budget and slightly less than prior year. Our change in net position after contributions, this is a year-to-date measurement compared to our budget. We're at $3.3 million greater than budget. We do see that change in net position after contributions dip down this month. And again, that's partly due to that reversal entry in the power stabilization fund that affected those electric revenues. Our operating revenue is $62.6 million greater than budget. Our operating expenses are $69.5 million greater than budget, which includes those purchase power and water costs. And our non-operating revenue and expenses is $1.6 million favorable compared to the budget. Even with that PSF entry, I just wanted to note, and the change in net position after contributions is showing up negative. We are still ahead of the budget and will continue to see conservative operating expenses and increased impact fees. We should end up the fiscal year in a positive position. And then our capital projects expenditures through March, we're showing under budget for the fiscal year. Electric is reporting out at 58% compared to the budget, 27% compared to the budget for water. Wastewater is at 32% and support services is at 6%. And that's the end of the financial update if there's any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Kimberly? Okay, thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to consent items for action. Number 1, approved minutes of the NB regular board meeting of March 25, 2021. Number 2, approved minutes of the NBU special board meeting of March 31, 2021. Number 3, approve the change order log from February 15, 2021 through March 15, 2021. Number 4, approve the reports for water and electric engineering contracts from August 1, 2020 through March 15, 2021. Number 5, authorize CEO or his designee to negotiate and execute a construction contract with D. Querta Construction LLC for the construction of the Castell Avenue rehabilitation project. Number 6, authorize CEO or his designee to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with Friesen Nichols Inc. for the design of the McKenzie Interceptor upgrade project. Number 7, authorize the CEO or his designee to execute and or file a water CCN transfer agreement among NDU, Green Valley Special Utility District, and SA Given to Fly LP for the Morningside Hills development and any documents related to such transfer with the Texas Public Utility Commission. Number 8, authorize CEO or his designee to negotiate and execute a contract with Altec Industries Inc. for the purchase of a 60-foot reach bucket truck and a 55 articulating telescopic aerial device truck. Number 9, authorize CEO or his designee to negotiate and execute an equipment rental agreement with Herc Rentals Inc. and Rocky Hill Equipment Rental. I'll entertain them.
I'll move for approval of the consent items as read.
And this is Bob Gray. I'll second.
Okay, we've got a first and second. Laura, if you'll please take roll.
Mr. Harrell,
Yes, ma'am, I approve.
Dr. Hoffman,
Approve.
Mayor Brockman,
Approve.
Mr. Gray,
Approve.
Mr. Peters. He says yes. He's got a thumbs up. Unanimous approval.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Okay, items for future action. Number 1, review and discuss proposed revisions to the NBU board governance policies.
Good afternoon. It's Mr. Harrell, it's me. I'll
Okay.
take this. Good afternoon. I'm very excited to present this item for future action. We're presenting for review and discussion today the proposed changes to the board governance policies. I'll give you a little bit of background. In 2010, the board established governance policies that basically defined how the board would operate. They were split up into 3 different types of policies: operational policies, governance policies, and board management policies. The governance policies were revised in 2016, and then late in September of last year, the board appointed a subcommittee called the Governance and Personnel Subcommittee to review and recommend proposed changes to these governance policies. There was a subcommittee appointed of the board vice president, Judy Hoffman, and John Harrell as president to sit on this board, and Christine Reinhardt as our outside counsel, and I would sit in the meetings to assist him with the different revisions to these policies. John and Judy have spent a significant amount of time going through all the policies. We helped and made revisions to those, presented the first draft to the board at its March retreat this year. And today, Christine Reinhardt will present on our behalf. And John and Judy, if you want to add in anything as we're going through, please feel free to do that. But Christine will present a recap of the proposed revisions to the policy that we discussed prior to the retreat. Also, the comments that we had during the retreat, and then we had some comments after. She'll also provide a schedule that will outline how we bring these in final form to the board next month, if that works, and that will include additional time to submit any final comments. Are there any other questions about that? If not, I'll ask Christine to start a presentation.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you for having me today to present on behalf of the Governance and Personnel Subcommittee. As Connie mentioned, the board last met on this particular issue on March 31st, and during that retreat, the board looked at various revisions the subcommittee had proposed. At the end of that retreat, the subcommittee asked for both whoever was in attendance to send any additional revisions, or any additional feedback for the subcommittee to review. We did receive one additional revision with regard to the annual planning policy that the subcommittee reviewed during their April 22nd meeting. And today we are here to present on behalf of the subcommittee really the changes that have been made since the board retreat, and also to present the final recommended policy revisions for the board's consideration at its next board meeting on May 25th. The board does have, and anybody else does have, one last opportunity to provide any additional revisions, and we're asking that any additional feedback or revisions be provided to the subcommittee by May 11th, 2021. And Laura, if we could go to the next slide. And if we can go to the next slide. Here's a summary of the revisions that were made prior to the retreat. We restructured the previous operational policies around NBU strategic goals. We incorporated the strategic goal measurements in lieu of maintaining separate operational and outcome policies, updated those policies to reflect current or preferred board and NBU practice and any feedback that had been received to date. We added a preface, so that way there was an explanation at the beginning of the policies as to how they came into being and why certain changes or how certain changes were being made and when those changes were being made. We also added new policies addressing the vice president's role and board member discipline, resignation, and removal. We reorganized a few pieces of policies that may have been in places that didn't make sense any longer. And we also revised any language that was identified as vague, unclear, or outdated. If we can go to the next slide. Following the retreat, we did go through the subcommittee did go through the policies and incorporated the feedback that was received. One of those, obviously, that you would see in the board packet, we provided actually two different versions of the revised governance policies. One contains all changes to date, and then we provided also another one that's much more simplified and easier to read that just reflects the changes from since the retreat itself. And those are all reflected in blue within the board packet, so you can easily identify as I go through these which of these changes have been made. One of those was reflecting our goal that we hope to achieve, which is for the board to approve these policies on May 25th, 2021, and to make them effective at the beginning of the next fiscal year on August 1st, 2021.
Christine, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We were going to toggle back and forth between the documents board, but we're not able to do that. So we'll just go through the changes. So Christine will say what the changes are here, and we'll show where those are in the simplified governance policies.
Yes, thank you, Connie. The next change was to the strategic goal number 1, that particular policy, and this was one that the board discussed in terms of specifying when the board would set its strategic goals and when it would review those strategic goals. And so those are reflected in blue, that the board is going to set its strategic goals at a minimum of every 5 years, and then would review those strategic goals on an annual basis. The next change post the retreat, if we could stay on the first slide. The next change post the retreat was with regard to moving an operating capital provision that was in the infrastructure technology policy that fit better in the financial excellence policy. And then we also clarified a particular language in the financial excellence policy regarding government filings and payments of that sort. So you will see those reflected in blue as well. If we can go to the next slide. We also, in the annual planning process, there was a clarification regarding the timing of the annual planning. And this was one of the feedback that we had received post the retreat, is that the timing didn't exactly match up to what was actually occurring. That has been clarified now, we believe, within the policy, and we reformulated that particular policy, hopefully to better reflect, more clearly reflect what the board's current practice and intentions are. The next one that we looked at was the governance investment policy. We reflected that in terms of board training, that would be conducted, of course, for the board president, but we added in there also with MBU staff assistants. And we also reflected some additional training resources for board members within the government investment policy itself. And then finally, we clarified, pursuant to the discussion that occurred at the retreat, some of the board communication guidelines that are reflected in the unity of control policy. So those are the changes you will see in blue. We did receive additional feedback regarding the board committees and whether or not the board committee policy that's in the governance policy includes all the appropriate standing committees, and the subcommittee will consider that at its next subcommittee meeting along with any additional feedback. And so if we can go to the timeline, we can talk about where we go from here. Again, May 11th is the deadline to submit any additional feedback or suggested revisions for the Governance and Personnel Subcommittee to review. That can be submitted directly through Connie Locke, who's the General Counsel. And then on May 18th or thereabouts, the subcommittee will meet again and will review any final additional feedback received and finalize the final version of the governance policy revisions, and we will distribute those the following day to the board for consideration and approval at its May 25th meeting. We will probably follow the same that we have done with respect to the documents received today in terms of providing one document with all revisions and then a second document that'll just reflect the revisions made since this meeting up until the date that they are presented. And then hopefully the board will be in a good position on May 25th to consider and hopefully adopt the final policy revisions. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know. I don't know, Mr. Harrell, Ms. Hoffman, if you have any comments you want to share.
No, ma'am, I don't. I think you recapped everything perfectly. We have put a lot of time in this. I want to thank Christine and Connie for their time, because this has not been an easy task. We knew it was going to be a lot of time and energy involved, and it's going to be a good product when we have completed it. I will assure you of that.
I echo John's comments. Thank you, Connie and Christine.
Thank you. And I guess, Christine, do we want to go ahead and go through those governance policies real quick just to show the changes? I think it's worth just showing those. Laura, are you able to get to those? So, Christine, do you want to say what these are? These are
Absolutely. These are the governance policies, as I mentioned, and this is the document that reflects just the changes since the March 31st retreat. That's indicated, of course, in the header at top, and you can see any of the changes that are there in blue, even including the date changes. If we want to go down a little bit further, Laura, to maybe SG number 5, where you are right now, you can see where we clarified item number 5 on government filings, and where we moved, for instance, a number 7, which came formerly from the infrastructure and technology policy. And then Laura, if you want to go down further to the next set, which will be in the board governance policies. And it's going to be board governance number 11 and 12 primarily.
Go ahead.
Here's board governance policy number 11, which is the annual planning policy. You can see here in number 1, the changes that the subcommittee has recommended making to help clarify the annual planning process, when it occurs, and exactly what is done as part of that process, at least from a very broad perspective. Go ahead, Mr. Harrell.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate your request for any comments or input prior to May 11. We really want this to be, this is everybody's document. This is our playbook, and I would just further encourage anyone on the board to make comment or input prior to the 11th, because we want this to be as clean and complete as possible. So I would encourage, any review or any comment. Now is certainly the time, and we want to get this right. So please step up if you have something to benefit the finished product.
Thank you. Here we have, we just have 2 more to go through. Board governance policy number 12. These are the very minor changes that were made post the retreat in terms of reference to the staff, and then some additional training resources. And then Laura, if we can go to the board management delegation policy number 2, unity of control. And this is here where you'll see the clarified language that was added after the board's discussion in the retreat regarding communication, and some guidelines and rules regarding the communication with NBU, and with in terms of internal communication between the board as well as with the CEO. And that is all the revisions that have been made to date.
Anyone have any comments, questions?
I'll just ask a question, John. This is Wayne. Can I presume that the comments we've already sent in, you'll consider at the May subcommittee meeting? Is that the idea?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe, excuse me, I'm sorry, Bob. I believe Christine referred to your input, Wayne, that we had gotten before, which we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Right, and Mr. Peters, we did, I'm sorry, Mr. Gray, Mr. Peters, just to kind of close the loop on that, we did adjust the annual planning, but the most recent comments you said about the committees, we will discuss at our next meeting, committee meeting.
Yeah.
And John, I've looked at the drafts, and I looked at this most recent draft, but I think they're very, it's basically updating our policies, and I think it's a great project, and I'm glad we're doing it, but I'll review it again and let you know. I'll give you at least a few days before May 11th, but I think so far I hadn't seen any substantial comments on my end, but I'll review it again.
Thank you. It's like a tax return. You have until the 11th, so you can hit us late in the day if you'd like. We built in for that. Okay, hearing no more comments, we appreciate the work, Connie and Christine. So we will march forward and get this buttoned up and get it reviewed once again, and see where we can get this get it completed. Okay, that takes us to action items. Number 1, discuss, consider authorizing proposed changes to the New Braunfels Utilities financial policy.
Hi, good afternoon, board. John Warren, finance manager here. Today I'm going to talk about updates to financial policy. The financial policies or policy updates are often included on consent items for action. But this item we felt it was best to have an action item so that the board could actually see the updates that were made, as they are a result of the financial impact of the winter storm events, COVID, and wanted to make certain that the financial policy reflected the measures that need to be taken, as well as for any future similar events that we have language in there. Next slide, please. So before we get into the updates, just wanted to talk about the reasons for the financial policy update. As I said before, it's to address any extraordinary circumstances, specifically to address the necessary actions that were taken in response to the financial impact of SNOVA 2021, also to address the fiscal impact of the anticipated payoff of the taxable note, which we're planning to pay off in FY 2023. So if you recall, it was shortly after the winter storm event, we needed to get additional liquidity in a very quick and timely manner, and we were able to do so by getting the taxable note through JP Morgan. So the financial policy will reflect situations such as that, and then also to address any alternative liquidity options. Next slide, please. All right, so when looking at these updates, the font that's in purple font are new language or updated language in the policy. So the first update was in section 5 of the policy under financing. There's a new section, subsection C. And then this section is speaking to the target debt service coverage ratio, and under extraordinary circumstances, unusual and frequent, what that debt service requirement would be. So our financial policy has a 2.4 times debt service coverage ratio as a target. However, we're saying in extraordinary circumstances and events, depending on the measures that are taken, it could impact our financial ratios, which is the case with the taxable note when we pay that off. And so in those extraordinary circumstances, the target will be revised in those circumstances to meet the minimum requirement for the additional bonds test. And the additional bonds test is 1.4 times the average annual debt service requirement. So that would be moving from 2.4 times to 1.4 times in those events. Next slide, please. All right, so section 7, alternative financing, subsection A. So once again, the purple font is the new language. So as you already know, we already have a commercial paper program. It's a tax-exempt commercial paper program. And as a result of the storm, the tax-exempt commercial paper was not, the repayment of power costs was not an eligible use of those proceeds and that liquidity. If we had a taxable commercial paper program, which we do not, those proceeds would have been able to be used for that purpose. And so this language is just saying in future, MDU may use a tax-exempt and/or taxable commercial paper program as needed to meet business proceeds. Once again, we do not currently have a taxable commercial paper program, but it's just providing language if that was deemed to be the best appropriate action. Next slide, please. All right, section 7, alternative financing. This is a new subsection in that section, subsection B, and it's talking about short-term financing. So on the first slide, where we were speaking to addressing the necessary actions taken in response to SNOVID, and where we spoke of addressing alternative liquidity options, that's what this language is speaking to. So if market or business conditions exist that require additional infusion of cash for MDU to meet its stated financial objectives, and to continue to meet customer public service responsibilities, and you may secure other short-term tax-exempt and/or taxable financing alternatives. So once again, the taxable note is an example of this, right? It was a short-term taxable financing alternative, and we just wanted to have language in the policy that reflected if it's deemed appropriate to do such. And I believe that's the last slide. Just if you had any questions on any of the presented information.
John, I do not. Any questions? Okay, not hearing any questions. I'll entertain a motion to authorize the proposed changes to the policy.
I want to first thank you, John and Dawn and your team for working through this. We met about a number of these issues earlier, but I make a motion we approve as presented. Bob Gray.
I'll second Wayne Peters.
Okay, I've got a first and second. Laura, if you please take roll.
Mr. Harrell,
Yes, ma'am, approved.
Dr. Hoffman,
Approve.
Mayor Brockman,
Approve.
Mr. Gray,
Approve.
Mr. Peters.
Approve.
Unanimous consent.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Dawn. I know you're also part of the brains behind that package. Okay, executive session. The Board of Trustees may recess an executive session for any purpose permitted by the Texas Open Meetings Act, including but not limited to, number 1, power supply resources, competitive matters, section 551.086 Texas Government Code. Number 2, consultation with attorney regarding pending and contemplated litigation, settlement offer, or other matters protected by attorney-client privilege. Power supply resources, competitive matters, section 551.071 Texas Government Code, section 551.086 Texas Government Code. Consider matters associated with pricing information, risk management, claims notices, contracts related to, and actions taken by ERCOT in response to the February 2021 winter storm. Number 3, consultation with attorney, consultation with attorney regarding pending and contemplated litigation, settlement offer, or other matters protected by attorney-client privilege, section 551.071 Texas Government Code. A, discuss the utility construction and cost-sharing agreement for the Copper Ridge subdivision and related amendments and modifications, all among NBU, Sutherland Communities, NB Land Properties Limited, and Sutherland Copper Ridge LLC. Number 4, consultation with attorney regarding pending and contemplated litigation, settlement offer, or other matters protected by attorney-client privilege, section 551.071 Texas Government Code. A, City of New Braunfels acting by and through the Board of Trustees of the New Braunfels Utilities versus Myrtle Marie Properties LLC, number 2020 CVA 0161. County Court at Law number 1, Comal County, Texas, April 3, 2020. B, City of New Braunfels acting by and through the Board of Trustees of the New Braunfels Utilities versus Joshua Wesley Owens, number 2020 CVB 0160. County Court at Law number 2, Comal County, Texas, April 3, 2020. Number 5, consultation with attorney regarding pending and contemplated litigation, settlement offer, or other matters protected by attorney-client privilege, personal matters, section 551.071 Texas Government Code, section 551.074 Texas Government Code. A, deliberate plan and strategy for implementation of executive agreement for Chief Executive Officer. The Board of Trustees, upon reconvening in open session, will discuss and consider any action if necessary regarding closed session items. Let's see here. I have got 1:58. Y'all want to take a 5 or 10 minute break between executive session? I see 10. Okay, we'll take 10 minutes. Let's see here. I may fudge on the number. How about we go, let's see, 2 o'clock. How about 2:10? We'll call in on the executive line. Thank y'all.